Let the church say, come on and say, give God a.
5 words that describe gospel.
Anointed,
Let the church say,
refreshing,
give God.
Exciting.
We surrender and say,
fulfilling,
God, the Father, the Holy Spirit.
When it comes to West Coast gospel music, all eyes have been on Los Angeles with the sounds of Andre Crouch and James Cleveland, and the Bay Area with Walter and Edwin Hawkins. But there's a deep, rich sound that comes from a place in between those regions with a history in gospel that many don't know exists. It's the gospel according to Fresno. Fresno's rich gospel heritage sound and history stretches back decades, with the earliest recollections of that classic sound coming out of the 1950s throughout the 1970s.
The earliest recollection was that there were people that gathered, sang out of hymnals, as well as sang from words that they remembered, sang from inspiration. It was a combination, but it was more kind of settled as opposed to the jubilant singing that we see now.
My early days of gospel music in Fresno was at Fresno Temple, and I was a part of the choir, and every Sunday morning we sang hymnals. That was our opening service when we would do the hymnals. And of course, during the service, we would do other choir music. But those hymnals, Dad Rogers, he would always want to have those hymnals at the beginning of the service.
Within the Baptist sphere, they had this choir night once a month, and the choirs from the different churches would get together and they would sing. I think it was called the Singing Convention, I believe. And they would go from church to church.
My grandmother opened up the first Pentecostal Apostolic Church in Fresno. And so it was later named the Witness of Jesus Christ Church. And so my father, Lewis Sanders, his brother Marion Sanders, which was Bishop Sanders of the Witness of Jesus Christ Church pastor.
The 1970s saw an influx of many influential singers and musicians making their way to the Valley. Fresno's early sound, while being a mixture of different areas, was oftentimes noted for being a few steps behind.
Well, by the time I came to Fresno, I had been only to like maybe a different state, like Illinois. I'd been up there and I'd seen, and that was one of the gospel capitals of the world at that time. They had a lot of music, so it was different in that it was not as contemporary. The styles were just it was more on a quartet style or a hymnal, strictly the music style. There were a lot of choirs at churches.
The earlier sounds of African American music in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, it was more conservative. Wasn't a lot of drums and a lot of instrumentation. I would call it gospel light. It wasn't really heavy gospel. We did a lot of anthems, a lot of spirituals, a lot of a cappella music, and a lot of music was a lot of the church musical practice was done using sight singing. So they had actual scores of songs, and many of our choir members could read music.
It was basically just, piano, sometimes piano and organ. And that was back in the 50s, the 60s, early 70s.
We had a mixture of musicians that was from different areas. Like myself, I wasn't from Fresno originally. I came, my parents brought me this way from Arkansas, and then I began to integrate into the move and the style they had here. So we had different ones that were from different states.
For coming from the Bay Area, that they were a little bit behind on some of the information or some of the songs because they didn't come down here or didn't reach this area like it does now. So pretty much came down, and it was a shock to me that some of the songs that we sang and that were prevalent at the time that they did not know. They were still kind of doing the songs from the 50s and early 60s.
Being located in between two major metropolitan regions in California made it challenging for the Valley to maintain a presence when it came to music and social justice awareness.
I think the church was influenced a great deal by what was socially going on because we weren't very aggressive here. There were very little activities for the young people to be involved in things outside of the school that was quite limited, and the church still was quite limited because I think our ethnocentrism made it look like that we never wanted to move in. You had that philosophy of oppression, but you didn't really like being there, but you weren't doing anything about it. So we created the first dance group. I was probably one of the first praise dancers in the school, churches in the San Joaquin Valley. I just do what I was doing in the Bay Area, which is just dancing, praising the Lord, working in the community. I did all of those things because I didn't see it here.
Although considered to be behind the times, Fresno had its fair share of talented musicians and groups who helped to cultivate the Fresno gospel sound.
I remember absolutely Naomi Williams-Beard. She was my mentor. She gave me an opportunity to play the piano in big district meetings. And back in the 60s and the 70s, our district meetings were like conferences. And there were a lot of people, and at that time I was shy. But she always pushed me and she gave me that opportunity.
Ruth Vance, that was her name. She played at Mount Pleasant, and Sister Miller, Jane Miller, played at St. Paul, and their choir was dynamic.
We came up with, we had the Supreme Jubilees, which was under the leadership of David Kingsby, and my cousins Melvin Sanders, Leonard Sanders, his brothers Tim and Philip, and then they even had a guitar player from he was from, let's see, Keynotes. Remember the gospel Keynotes? I
heard them at the Witness of Jesus Christ one time singing, and it was Supreme Jubilees. And I was so impressed when I heard their flavor. Yeah, they were a quartet group, but they was like quartet / contemporary. And Brother Leonard Sanders was that element. He was that flavor that took it from the hardcore quartet to a slightly contemporary funky, and it caught my attention. I felt like, okay, something on the table for everybody.
Jesse Evans, he was a piano player, classical also, and he had also done recordings and traveled all over the country. And but he came to Pearly Grove, and he was working with the gospel choir. One of the greatest musicians that I enjoyed watching was the Hawkins, one of the Hawkins brothers that played. He came to Fresno during a state meeting. This has been years and years ago. And as a matter of fact, my mother cooked pancakes and breakfast for them. I think it was Walter, and I think his name is Daniel. And he came, they ate at my mom's house on Modoc Street. They stayed across the street, but they were coming for one of the conventions. And I always enjoyed his playing.
The choir era in the 70s and 80s began to take over the valley. Church choirs and brand new community choirs started blossoming, one of the earliest community choirs being the West Fresno Community Choir.
The West Fresno Christian Community Choir really originated actually like an offshoot of the Black Educational Theater with Dr. Shirley Brown, and whom we were a part of, because we had integrated African music, dance, modeling, gospel, hymnals, and the songs from the field. We had integrated into the Black Educational Theater, because we actually worked with Showboat and some of those local people. But the West Fresno Community Choir evolved with Ann Bolden, St. Red, Ron Chapman, I think he was from Fresno Temple, and myself. We were the three people that actually organized and gave it a name. And we would meet, our first meetings were probably at St. Rest Church.
When I think about the West Fresno Community Choir, I think of Ann Bolden. She was kind of like the mother of the choir. And I remember the rehearsals. I remember when we would go on different engagements. And to me, that choir spoke about stability, about harmony, about sticking together when things get rough, about being a unit that really supported each other and supported what we were doing. I enjoyed being a part of that choir. And I lived in Merced, so I would travel here. And we did have members that lived in Merced that were also a part of that choir.
With the choir, gospel music sound really took hold in Fresno when the Fresno the Fresno Community Choir began. Omi Cormier was there, Karen Pennywell, Marcia Tate, several of the, Nick Waller, several of the members of the community were involved in the community choir.
The West Fresno Community Choir was probably one of the choirs that would pack a church. I don't care where they went, it would be standing room only. People wanted to know what were we doing and what were we singing this time, and people would bring their tape recorders so they could tape and bring it back to their church homes. And that, if you heard that West Fresno Community Choir was in concert or going to be somewhere, everyone wanted to go. They just wanted to be there and be a part of it. So we were blessed in that.
As choirs and quartets dominated the 70s and 80s era in Fresno, one promoter ran with the quartet sound like none other. David Kingsby, starting out as a radio personality alongside Woody Miller, brought much attention to gospel in Fresno.
David, started his radio show, and then it branched out and became a TV show, and so that that gave exposure to gospel music within the valley.
When I think of Brother David Kingsby, I think of opportunities, because he has afforded. I remember he even allowed my mother, Maddie Murray, to come on his show, his radio talk show. And I remember he had a television show also. And he allowed her to come and share the gospel of Jesus Christ.
David King had such a beautiful spirit to share gospel music that wasn't ancient on the radio, and that was such a wonderful smell to even hear, because when we came here, there was no music, maybe KLIP some with Woody Miller, but it was some, but Kingsby just added the flavor of giving recognition and a validation to gospel music, for which I hadn't heard in this area.
He would bring all kind of groups to Fresno. I can't even remember all the different groups he would bring to the Soul Stirrers, the Williams Brothers, the Supreme Jubilees sang with them, and he would bring the Mighty Clouds of Joy, and he would bring the keynotes, the gospel keynotes. And so he brought Shirley Caesar, he brought a lot of talent to Fresno, and he really exposed Fresno to a lot of gospel artists.
Over the years, David Kingsby became a household church name when it came to music, concerts, radio, and television, with his television show, The Gospel Connection, being a Saturday morning staple in many homes.
David Kingsby and the Gospel Collection was Saturday morning for me. You get up and you got to clean the house, you got to do your chores. So that was a chance to, have some gospel music while I cleaned because Mama didn't let us listen to nothing else.
Well, hello, folks. Here I am at Rosie's Flower Shop, located at 1419 Kern Street, right across from the Union Bank.
Yes, David Kingsby's Gospel Connection. That was always a joy. It had too many commercials.
There were a lot of commercials.
Viking furniture, large blue building, olive and thorn, olive and thorn. Oh my gosh.
And now that you've mentioned it, that was all the time on that show, I tell you. Everybody went to Viking furniture too. That was a good advertisement for them.
Well, people look forward to that on Saturday mornings and Fridays when it became Fridays to find out what was going on in the gospel world outside of Fresno. So he would bring videos of different groups and choirs and share that throughout the valley.
Brother Kingsby was a trailblazer when it came to quartet singing here in the valley in Fresno. Yeah.
In 1986, a new choir emerged in the valley. James Cleveland and the Gospel Music Workshop of America made their history-making mark in Fresno, placing the first GMWA component choir in the nation in Fresno.
The Gospel Music Workshop of America Fresno component, GMWA, we began actually it was a vision of Vernon Chappell. I will never forget, it was his vision and his desire that we would be a part of Gospel Music Workshop of America. And Pastor Gwen Amy she was actually our minister of music, our first minister of music for Gospel Music Workshop. Now, how we became part of it in '86, March of '86, we went to the board meeting, which was held in Las Vegas. And with Charles Fold was sent in to speak with Helen Stevens, who was going to be over us as part of the Northern California chapter, and we were going to be an extension of that. Charles Fold and Bishop Jamerson were assigned to question us, what does that mean? What is a component? How would it work? And it would just be an extension, because actually, if we went to Los Angeles, that was 4 hours away. Going to Oakland, that was about 3 hours away. So it was the lesser of two evils. We were closer to them. But we would be an extension so that the music that they received would come to us. The music that came from Gospel Music Workshop would come down through the Fresno area so that it could be shared with the different churches. And that was the whole point, that we would enhance our ministry in our various churches. That was the purpose that James Cleveland organized it for, and that's what the focus was for us at the time, that we would, but as we grew and as they accepted to try it, we were the first component, what they call component, in the country.
Everybody loved James Cleveland. He was just it at that time, and Savoy Records.
I loved it because I've always tried to bring groups together that don't maybe necessarily go to church together. And that was during that same time, we were going down to Bakersfield for Vernon Chappell's workshops.
It was fun at that time. It was, it's interesting. I grew up around here playing for my church, Moments of Blessings, and my father, who was the pastor at that time, allowed me to branch my wings and branch out to play for other ministries, which was a blessing. and that choir was one of the choirs because I had friends that are in the choir. So I was just, it allowed me to enhance my gift even more and spread my wings.
Hey, what's going to be taking place?
Oh, it's going to be a West Coast Regional Fellowship of the Gospel Music Workshop of America. It's going to be right here in Fresno at the Radisson Hotel.
As the GMWA Fresno component became a staple choir in Fresno, a conference was birthed which brought in choir directors, singers, and artists from all over the nation, the GMWA West Coast Regional.
When I think about the regional, I think hell of a lot of work. But we drew from all across the country, so it was kind of like a practice for the national convention.
What they did, it was kind of a part of the national, but just kind of watered down. We had classes, we had mass choir. People were coming from all over the country to have their songs presented in the West Coast Regional, because many of those songs ended up in the national on a recording.
I had no idea how the recordings came about, to find out that they had to go through thousands and thousands of written arrangements that were submitted, to come up with a CD with like 8 or 10 selections on it. My hat went off to these people.
There's something about an exchange of information and something about being supported and being encouraged by different people you don't see every day or every week, month. And so it was really good for us to have a way to associate with one another.
I think that was the greatest thing that could have happened to this area.
But we were the first. No one can take that from Fresno.
The choir scene, both in the local church and in the community, was stronger than ever. Friendly, yet evident competition was present.
It was a friendly competition most of the time because people just came and they wanted to give their best. You knew you did not want to be that choir that everybody sat on. So it was a strong look at how was the people reacting. How did the song, so you brought certain songs that garnered a strong reaction. Your vocals had to be on point. Your moves had to be on point. That was when choirs did moves and different things and they marched in. I mean, I remember St. Joseph Choir every year doing something just we had never seen before. But they're marching in. There was one year they tried to march in backwards. There was another year where the lights went out and we were like, okay, we thought somebody didn't pay the bill. And then when the lights came back on, they were in the choir stand.
Denominational barriers were a point of issue for some, oftentimes making fellowship difficult.
There's always been denominational barriers. They're for real, they exist now, they have existed for a long time. I can remember not being allowed to play for other denominations because they were not of my denomination.
If you were Kojic singing with a Baptist choir, we might sneak and attend the musicals, but to actually be in a choir together, a lot of young people that were faithful to their churches they caught a lot of slack for that. I can remember days where I would hear certain pastors, I won't say any names, but say that you should not be fellowshipping with that Baptist church, or you shouldn't be going over to that apostolic church. Those people are not believers. You don't eat at everybody's table. Those are the things that we were taught.
There were pastors and leaders of established churches who started to feel a little territorial, especially if friends would want to start being with each other and visiting each other's churches, and then pastors and leaders would go, well, wait a minute, home comes first. And in our mind, we just wanted to hang out with our friends. We just wanted to continue to sing together and hang out with one another. We weren't trying to hop from church to church. We were just trying to hang out with our friends.
We were almost like forbidden
to go up the street, down the street, where was another church where Spoonie, we called him Spoonie, I always called him Spoonie, he's a drummer, but his father, O.J. Johnson, he was playing drums then. I remember Spoonie dad was playing drums, but they had church up the street, walking distance. And when we was playing at Fresno Temple, we get a break, we would sneak out of the church and run down there to the Apostolic Church. And we didn't want to get caught because we would get heat from that. It was more division back then.
Even though if you were a really good choir, you would get invited, because that was just how things were. If you were a great singer, you would get invited. There was, but the issue was there was still a very, everybody had their own particular sets. You had your Church of God in Christ set. You had your Apostolic set. You had your Baptist set. They thought we were not saved. A lot of them thought we were not saved because we were Baptist kids, and we thought that they were fanatical and crazy. They couldn't wear regular clothes. We thought that they lived a pretty sad life, because they had to wear church clothes to school. So there were times when it was not a mix. The only time we came together was a musical, but there were no Baptist preachers preaching at apostolic churches, Church of God in Christ churches. You didn't see Kojic pastors preaching or at Baptist churches. There was no real much fellowship, during those times. They knew of each other. There was a respect, but there was no, as far as from my perspective, I'll just say, there was not really much mingling or fellowship from what I saw, not as much.
One of the earliest, most popular choir directors of the 80s, who was able to fearlessly push past denominational and cultural barriers, was Solomon Palmer.
Oh, Solomon was larger than life. He was not shy.
Solomon was a real person. I mean, he could go from smart to silly, in just a flip of the switch.
Oh, Solomon Palmer, Big Jack. I called him Big Jack. He was Jack loved God, and he loved music, and he loved to play. And nothing scared him.
And I remember at his father's funeral, the people were singing, they were singing sad songs. If my dad wasn't dead, y'all would kill him. He didn't want no dead service. He said, y'all need to pick this up. I mean, he was that kind of guy. He spoke what was on his mind.
He loved to, we called it play the dozen. And I never forget about Solomon. Solomon tell people all day long when they try to talk about his weight. He said, I tell you what, let me get it out right now. Go ahead and talk about my weight. But that's the only thing you're going to be able to say. He said, but once you finish, then it's going to be my turn.
A great dancer. He could shout. Didn't matter the size. He could shout. He was with us one time when we invited, again, Sister Gwen Amy, and he came. And in fact, he got happy on the organ, and I had to stop him from shouting because I didn't want the church to be interrupted. But Solomon he loved church, he loved the Lord, but he loved to play the organ.
People he would draw to Solomon, and Solomon could draw people. He would, at the drop of a hat, he'd have a choir. And they would they'd tour around Fresno or go to different churches or whatever, and it's just for the purpose of serving the Lord.
When we went to the Armenian Presbyterian Church, I think it was, Armenian Presbyterian Church, with the component choir, and Solomon was in the choir, and it was a bunch of people with a lot of money, and he was singing a song and asking people, have you ever been down to your last dime? That kind of thing. As he was singing and he was moving forward, one of the little ladies said, he's coming this way.
He had a beautiful spirit to teach and sing. I think his burden was that we could not actually minister effectively to him over the time with all the greatness that's in him. Unfortunately, I think so many people are great, but they don't actually have a chance and opportunity to release that, because he just did some good things with music, and I think probably his health was one of the factors that caused his demise.
And so I begin to say, Lord, anoint me. I don't want to just sing, Lord, but I want to touch somebody.
Solomon basically was the Thomas Whitfield for this area when it comes to choir directing, arranging music, and people just wanting to sing with him and work with him. He was the choir director of the 80s, arguably the biggest choir director of the 80s, the most popular choir director of the 80s. I know it's kind of hard to say that because there were so many choir directors in the 80s, but everybody knew Solomon. Everybody loved Solomon.
Well, Solomon, he was the lively stone in the building, so of course, when you took that away from us, then it left a gap.
I think he took advantage of the years that God allowed him to live, and he gave it back to God through his ministry of music. That was one of the ways.
There's no
Solomon Palmer unfortunately passed in 1992, but his legacy continues. By the time the 1990s hit, many local churches in Fresno were known for their choirs and choir directors.
And I'm just being real, within the Pentecostal churches, we were kind of high-spirited. In the Baptist church, it was kind of low-key. They didn't praise the Lord exactly like the Pentecostal churches did. But then there was one church that popped up on the scene, the choir, and all of a sudden that was Pearly Grove.
Pearly Grove.
Pearly Grove. They were Pearly Groove back then.
People would call Pearly Grove to come sing, and when the people knew that they were going to be on program, was no problem.
Pearly Grove, I would say, was ahead of their time. They wasn't in that trick box because Pearly Grove was always banging. You know, they choir, they had gifted musicians over there that was banging. They was pretty much always organized.
Linda was just so explicit with her choir, her musicians. Everything was ready. Everybody else was playing like I don't know, just they were playing in another style, an older style.
Pearly Grove could be singing with 10 people, and they sound like 50.
Nobody could do Genesis like Linda Coleman and Pearly Grove.
We came together, was at its peak. There were about close to 90 people in the choir. And we had a wide age range because everybody wanted to be in the choir.
I believe I would invite them anywhere. They were a good singing choir. They had the anointing. They were talented.
I mean, in terms of just the legacy, we sang, we did our best for God.
The mainstay Apostolic Church of Fresno, Bethesda, led by Bishop Henry L. Johnson, was also known for their power-packed church choir and their power-packed services they'd have over off Whitesbridge Avenue.
There's a lot of legacy in that, in the Bethesda choir. Like my dad was in the choir, Freddie Elston. My mom was a part of the choir. Angie, Jackie Gibbons, I mentioned. You know, Emmanuel Grigsby, one of the coldest singers in Fresno ever, and I love him.
Bishop Johnson was very hands-on with the choir. Of course, you know, his wife, the late Magnolia Johnson, is the founder of the choir, but Bishop Johnson was very, very much involved with our choir. He met with the choir often, even before our singing on Sunday mornings. He would always come in and check on the choir and pray with the choir and make sure that we were ready. Nobody got into the choir unless they came through Bishop Johnson, and nobody got out of the choir unless they had an exit interview with Bishop Johnson. But that's just part of who he was. He wanted to make sure the saints were saved and that they were living right. I was under his ministry for 31 years. Bishop Johnson was a great pastor. He was into pastoring. And you know, he would ask you questions like, how are you and the Lord doing? You know, just to make sure you're all right, or you know, that you're in right standing with God, and that's the key.
We would travel to Bishop Robert McMurray in L.A. They would come to Fresno, and we would go to L.A. and Bishop McMurray would, if you knew him, he would talk about Johnson bringing that choir down here and tearing up my church.
I would say probably in the late 90s, I started working with the Bethesda choir, and the choir was phenomenal. And we did a lot of music. As a matter of fact, we got contacted by Channel 26, Fox Channel, to do a commercial for them. And if you can go back in the archives, you'll see it was under my direction, and we did a big commercial for Fox. I think it was for sports or whatever. We did a big commercial, and we sang, and they were just so enamored and impressed with our quality of sound. It was like a sound. Fresno had a sound, and Bethesda choir had a sound. And so I worked with them, and we were successful in putting together that commercial, and it was very, very successful. They kept playing it and playing it and playing it. But anyway, so I was going to say, I didn't get paid, but anyway, we did a lot of volunteer work just to get out there and get the gospel out there, the good sound and the message of gospel and gospel music.
A major voice behind the sound and effectiveness of Bethesda's choir was their ever-popular director, Evangelist Joanne McClay.
Evangelist Joanne McClay is someone I respect tremendously. She was gone way too soon. She was a great mentor to me, a great organist. She was also a tremendous teacher of the Word of God as well.
She took the Bethesda Apostolic Church choir to the next level. And I'll tell you, they were known for some of the most phenomenal singing. We'd have our big conferences. Their choir was phenomenal, and they would do some of the hit songs.
She would always stay up on the latest music, on the latest techniques, all those kinds of things. And when she came to rehearsal, you know that she was very, very well prepared. You know, she knew that music, she knew the parts. And if you hit that wrong part, she had that kind of ear where she'd hear you. Come on, tenors now, come on now, straighten that up now. Y'all off, y'all flat. And we'd stay on that song until we had it right. And through Joanne McClay, too, we did all kinds of music. We did gospel music. We do Christmas, we call them Christmas play music, Christmas cantatas, all of that, different types of music. But she was that good. She was that good.
She was just a beautiful person. Man, gone too soon, I would say, but she was that type of person, yeah.
Perhaps the most well-respected Baptist church choir and church choir sound came out of St. Rest Baptist Church.
What made the St. Rest music department, especially in the 90s, so special? I have to start it with one name, and I'll go further, but one name: Sylvia Norman.
Sylvia Norman had us rocking.
That woman, she brought so much to not only Fresno, but to St. Rest. She exposed us to voices we would have never heard, we would have never experienced. But she went out there and she gathered and garnered these relationships with so many different people and brought them to us with workshop after workshop after workshop.
What brought us together, I'd say, in the 90s and the 2000s was the fact that, again, the teaching of being Christ-centered, being one, that everyone was important, that everyone's not going to like the same songs or the same music, but everybody has, because everyone's an individual with different tastes, but everyone had a right to be ministered to.
And then my mom, Marcia Bell, at the time when she was leading the youth and young adult choir, had us rocking. Our musicians were on point. Sopranos, altos, tenors were on point. We were an amazing choir.
One of the major influences to not just the St. Rest Choir, but to the city of Fresno was the pastor, Reverend Chester Riggins.
I remember his leadership as far as the music ministry. He was actually he was the minister for the West Fresno Community Choir. He was our chaplain. He was one who encouraged young people and encouraged the music department. He was an innovator because he could see, he had a vision of what people could do when they worked together.
What can I not say about Reverend Chester Riggins? One of the most legendary men of God, pastors, community leader, just a father in every way to West Fresno. When you think of West Fresno, and primarily black pastors, at the top of that list, one of the tops of the list, you would think Reverend Chester Riggins. He was like the Martin Luther King of Fresno.
But Chester Riggins, that is my spiritual dad then, to really make me understand the simplicity of the gospel and the salvation story and the love for people, treating people like your family.
Reverend Reagan was a great man, great preacher, great friend. There has been none like him. Greatest Baptist pastor we've had here in the city of Fresno.
The Mother Church of Fresno, as is often recognized by the Church of God in Christ, is Fresno Temple, known and respected for their music and their leader, Bishop Warren Wilson.
First came here to Fresno Temple, Bishop Wilson wasn't accepting, in a sense that he he was really stern. When they brought me in, the ushers brought me and said, this guy is from out of state and he wants to find a church. And Bishop, who is he? You know, what did he want? You know, and so then they brought him in and brought me in, and I sat down and talked with him, and he said, well, my minister of music just left and I'm looking for one. And he said, you're not coming here to destroy my choir, are you? I said, no, I'm not coming to destroy your choir, just coming to help out. And so I left kind of deflated, you know. And so Sister Frost, you remember Sister Irene Frost, she saw me going out the door and she came and she grabbed me. She said, the Lord told me that he was going to send me a director. She said, do you play? I said, I dabble a little bit. She said, do you teach choir? I said, yeah, I do that. And I sing, you know. And she says, why don't you come to my rehearsal on Wednesday night? So, and she went back and told Bishop the story. And she says, I want him here, Bishop. And Bishop said, okay, I want to see what he could do. And so I came to rehearsal on Wednesday night. Bishop sat out there and watched. And so I guess I got his stamp of approval. And so I've been here ever since.
Oh, Bishop Wilson, that was one of my best friends. He was a very misunderstood person, but he was very kind, very gentle, very generous, and he was very knowledgeable.
Bishop Wilson back in the day, he was hardcore. He was a no-nonsense guy. We feared him, but it turned out to make me a better musician, a better person, someone who learned how to be serious about my craft and the Lord.
You had to be on top of your game when you came in here, whoever, whether it's a musician or a director or singer, you know, otherwise he didn't endorse you.
Oh, Lord, come on, Joy. How excellent.
When I was introduced to Fresno Temple Choir, I felt that I had struck a gold mine because I was blessed to have great singers in the soprano section, alto section, the tenor section. I had in the soprano section, Levita Wheeler, Joyce Fields, Simone Thornton, Nikki Husband, and then in the alto section, that was Teresa Hall over there, and then in the tenor section, Bonnell Newsome, Clint Edwards. So all these people were great singers, and then eventually Jonathan Johnson came along, and he was born out of the choir.
The word stability comes to mind with Fresno Temple Choir. The stick'ems, you know, no matter what comes, no matter what goes, they're there.
The Church of God in Christ Convocation era with the California Valley jurisdiction was memorable and historical, especially in the 90s, for their meetings and musicals.
Whoever was the jurisdictional minister of music, and I know a couple of them, Gwen Amy, I think Elder Bailey was, and Mary McGee from Bakersfield, they would come to the musical that night, and they would just have a variety of different choirs. It was exciting, and you know the size of Fresno Temple. And musical night, Monday night, it would be packed. Believe me, I'm just not saying that Fresno Temple would be packed.
The church at that time to us was larger than life. That was like our mega ministry back then. They had the upstairs and downstairs with the balcony. So that was already amazing. It was extremely huge on the inside. That bottom floor, when you walked in there as a singer, you felt like, oh, I better bring it. And Bishop Wilson, he was a little bit scary, a lot of bit scary.
Now, convocation time, it wasn't time to be trying to learning. It wasn't time to try to learn or to practice. Listen, these were polished people.
You had to get there early because you were going to be in the back. And as a musician, you wanted to be close to the front because you may get a shot to play. So you want to, hey, you know, just hey, I'm next. So you wanted to be right there where the music was. And two, that was inspiring because what you got to do is you were able to hear some things.
I remember Twinkie Clark came, and my gosh, we waited and just waited in anticipation for her, and she blew us away as we thought.
The anointing, the powerful power of God was present in each of those services.
When I came, Anthony Bailey was the state minister of music, and then he was going to give it up. And so he served one more year, and I worked under him, and he asked if I wanted to be the state minister of music. And I said, well, give me another year because I don't know everybody, because I came in '89. And Bishop even came to me. He said, Anthony's going to give it up, and I wonder if you would take it over. I said, no, Bishop, I don't want to take it over. He was like, what? I was counting on you to take it. I said, give me one more year. And so the year came, and I took it over. But I had my first convocation, after Anthony. Of course, when Anthony was here, I saw all the great singers from all over the valley. It wasn't just Kojic, because also were invited in people, Apostolic, Baptist, Pentecostal. So everybody was here that night. of the midnight musical. So it's kind of patterned after what happens in the international. And so even Solomon, as I talked about earlier, and then Gwen Amy and all of them, they brought their groups. And then I heard all the different ones who could sing. I was like, wow, this is great. This is top notch. I've never seen anything like it before. And so after Anthony stepped down and I took over, and then I branded it after him and then took it to another level. Whereas he would have the musicals downstairs, I brought it upstairs. And so then it opened the gate for everybody. So anybody who could sing could come from the audience. And so funny story is that some people would send requests of, let so-and-so sing His Eyes on the Sparrow. And so it's so funny. So after a couple of years, I caught on to it. So there's a couple of people who would put themselves on program. And so they said, did you know, Brother Parker, that she was writing out the notes requesting to be, and when the person would come up, she's like, they want me to sing? Wow, His Eyes on the Sparrow. And I was like, really? Yeah.
Many more choirs made statements in the city, but one in particular was a force to be reckoned with, and one of its kind. Born Again and Delivered.
Hey, that little choir, I won't say little choir, but they're young and they can sing.
Oh, I'm wearing their t-shirt this morning.
Oh, yeah.
So, Born Again and Delivered. Bad. They're bad.
BAD was the Walt Whitman and Soul Children of Chicago, Mississippi Mass Children's Choir. That's what they were for this area.
So BAD was just, it's almost like lightning in a bottle, because what made it special was so many talented young musicians, first of all, because I didn't know that growing up. You know, I was an apostolic, and so since they weren't really allowed on there, I didn't know that there were any other younger teenage musicians.
We were a collective of aspiring singers and artists who just wanted to get together and sing. There was no real agenda for us. We were singing, we were aspiring to sing. Some of us couldn't sing that great, me myself learning.
Everybody was a part. Everyone had a role. There was no big guys, little U's. It was like all of us were there. I mean, whoever you were at your school or whatever, that didn't matter coming to BAD. It was kind of like we all kicked it, we all had a good time, and it really sparked some ideas musically.
BAD's fearless director, Marsha Jones, had a vision from the beginning that sparked something amazing.
BAD began actually as a children's music workshop. So there was always music workshops for adults. At that time, the infamous Bakersfield Community Workshop under the direction of Vernon Chappell had just started. But there wasn't anything really for youth. There wasn't anything for youth here in Fresno. So I just had a desire to bring children together. And we had a workshop on a weekend, and they ministered that evening. And from that, Born Again and Delivered was birthed. It was actually initially the Fresno Children's Community Choir. And then later on, a couple of years later, it was actually Karen Pennywell that came up with the acronym BAD. So BAD, Born Again and Delivered, was changed about 2 or 3 years in to have starting the choir.
We were children from all walks of life. So you had some kids that were super churched, and then you had some that were not churched. We were of different faiths, which is unheard of at that time.
It was the perfect example that young people can be, they can be used in ministry. They can find purpose. They can make a difference. So we weren't just anointed, but we were talented, and so we used those talents for God.
What made BAD special was that camaraderie, that us getting together. And then you had a special group of young and talented people that were there and and wanted to be excellent, wanted to be there, wanted to spread the gospel.
You get the right individuals together. At the same time, you get that right leader in there, and then you got the right musicians with them, and there's just kind of no limit to what you can do. And so BAD was able to kind of get the best of Fresno young people, and it was an interdenominational entity, which was good too. So it's kind of the best out of, you know, the different denominations.
Being the premier youth and young adult choir in the Valley didn't come without its hiccups, both expected and unexpected.
Were there tensions in the choir? Now you asking for trouble.
Well, actually, we didn't really have many challenges when they were younger. It's when they started to grow up and they started having boyfriend and girlfriends, and then so you have that dynamic.
Went to the GMWA one time in Oakland, and you know, some people were arguing about leads, and I mean, it was things, you know, that, you know, you as teenagers, that happens.
I do recall some times going out of town where we had to hold it together because people was about to, as we say, throw them bows.
You know, it was usually amongst the girls. The guys, we really, to be 100% honest, the guys, we never had an issue.
Especially when we traveled and all the girls from the other cities would be looking at our musicians. Oh, no, no, the bus ride home would be real quiet.
What the choir did not anticipate was the response and tension received from adults.
I would have to say likely that we were young people. How serious could folks really take our giftings, our aspirations to sing and to make music, to come together and to do what we did?
Because we were so young, people did not believe that we knew what we were singing about. And so there was this sort of unspoken skepticism that people would approach us with. Like, you're only 12 or 13. What do you mean, you know, God has been good to you your whole life? You only been here for 12 years. And so there was this unhealthy, unspoken skepticism towards us as young people, because some people did not believe that we knew what we were singing about and that we actually had a genuine relationship with Jesus Christ.
We got a lot of jealousy from adults. Lots of jealousy. We would be sitting there waiting to sing. You would literally have adults that would say, "Oh, y'all bad. Y'all think y'all bad? Oh, we're going to show y'all how bad y'all are." You know, just things like that. Just, I mean, adults throwing major shade at kids that are 13, 14, 15, 16. You know, that would say things to us that adults should not be saying to us.
BAD persevered, and as their success continued throughout the 90s, one young lady emerged from the choir forging her own unexpected path.
As special as Born Again and Delivered was, she was just still a whole nother level.
She did have a polish and almost like a maturity about her, even how she delivered a vocal.
You know, she came from a strong background of singers. You know, her grandmother and grandfather.
She was, for the most part, if you were to look at it, the first bright star coming out of BAD. There were so many talented kids in our choir, but in the midst of all of those talented kids, Reese, she stood out.
So being a part of BAD, it did afford me a few opportunities to branch out on my own and to record. And actually, the first opportunity that I had to record, I don't think many people know about this because it was a secular deal. Yes, I was 14. It was a secular deal. And this was with Buster and Shivani in LA, some producers in LA. And I actually recorded 2 songs. And when we got those recordings back, my mother, God bless her soul, my mother, Marcia Christian Bell, she shook her head and she said, nah, not my baby. We're not gonna do this. And at the time, Buster and Shivani were working on Kirk Franklin's What You Looking For album. So they had to put my secular album on the back burner anyway while they focused on Kirk Franklin's What You Looking For album. And that's when it kind of fizzled out. And my mom was like, you know, God's timing is the best. We don't need to be doing this anyway. So that was laid to rest. And then when I turned 16, that's when the gospel album came to be with Marcus Davis and Devin S. Records. So at 16, being able to travel around the world and sing about the goodness of Jesus Christ, overall, it was a beautiful experience. I was able to do what I love to do with the people that I really loved and trusted at the time. And it was a beautiful experience. But when I came home, that's when sort of the tension was there, because there were those that I grew up with and I loved and I sang with in choirs who were looking at me differently, as if I changed. And I was like, I'm still Reese. Like, I still go to Edison High School. I still am trying to get an A in my math class, just like you. Like, I'm still the same person. I'm still at St. Rest in the youth choir, in the young adult choir, in the youth group. I'm still the same person, but other people, their perception of me had changed. And so that was really hard to like navigate. Do I want to keep traveling and doing what I feel like God has called me to do, or do I want to be friends with everybody?
Eventually, Reese made the difficult decision to part ways with Bad.
My exit from Bad was twofold. Number one, my schedule was just absolutely too full and it was too busy. And I know now, today, that whenever I say yes to something, I'm automatically saying no to something else. And I just could not give myself fully to Bad anymore. I just didn't have the capacity anymore. That's the first part. The second part was I actually felt, disconnected. I felt very isolated. I felt almost as if, not I was kicked out of Bad, that's not it, but I didn't feel welcomed anymore. I didn't feel like it was home anymore because of the tension and people thinking that I changed when really I was like, I'm still Reese, I promise, I'm not changing, you know? And so that, again, that was difficult.
As Reese moved on, the choir era of the 90s was raging. Due to Bad's success, they embarked upon a first for the Valley, a community choir live recording. In 1998, the recording was held at the Fellowship Baptist Church.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tonight presenting for the first time in Fresno, California, Born Again and Delivered!
I went to Marcia and said, you know, let's memorialize these kids. And I wanted to, at the same time, get David Mangum and Jarrett, the experience and the exposure to recording.
The recording Bad did in '98 was scary. It was frightening because we still were young. I think I may have been 18, 19, somewhere around there, so we were still fairly young and had never done it before.
Normally, with our choir, obviously, we're singing covers, so we're singing songs of other people. Didn't really have to work that hard. You just learned the parts and the words and you were good. But in this moment, we had to rely on one another to create something magical or something great.
I remember us doing our sound check, and I was sitting there and I'm like, man, I wish that we could sound this way all the time, wherever we go. But you know, that was specialized equipment, you know, very expensive, but we had a glorious time.
Coming back and recording with Bad was amazing. I felt like I had time to heal in between me leaving and coming back to record. There was a lot of time for me to heal, and there was a lot of time for Bad to miss me. So when we came back together, it was beautiful, and I was able to come back not just as a guest vocalist on the album, but as a sister.
They used one of my songs on their recording, and I thought for this area and for our young kids, that was great.
It was exciting because these young people were about to do something different, something real. They were the first community choir, to my knowledge, that recorded in Fresno.
But they really took the time to cultivate that, and that live recording came out as a success.
If you think of most strong youth movements over the last 30 years, 9 times out of 10, if you research it, Marsha had a strong hand in that.
Sometimes, you know, you'll have a great group of people, and then the leader like sucks, and and then sometimes you have a great leader and the group sucks. So, but I mean, she just had the right personality.
But Marsha Jones was probably one of our first examples of a pillar within our young community.
The way that she shepherded us, not just in choir rehearsals, but even at engagements that we would go to, and we were young and we were tired and it was a midnight musical, she was just there for us. She was like another mother figure for so many people.
Whatever she does, it's as unto the Lord, and it's obvious because there's fruit behind what she does.
After the release of Bad's album, as all good things do, the choir came to an end.
So when Bad ended, it was kind of bittersweet. You know, I think we ended right about 99-ish or so after we put out the album, and I had been a part of Bad for about 5 years. Some people had been a part of it for 7, 8, 9.
Everyone was growing up, and we were moving on to different areas of our lives, and with such a special group that's hard to replace.
I also understood what transpires when you mature, when you grow, when you evolve, and where people begin to find their path. So in essence, Bad was a gift for a season.
I believe at that time, yeah, Bad had gone as far as we could. From that, and we see the fruits of that, you have, you know, these powerhouse minstrels, you have these powerhouse psalmists.
Even when Bad ended, there was like I said, it was bittersweet. It was a mourning, but also in the same token, it was a finality. We recognized it needed to end. Yeah.
Choir days in Fresno were beginning to slow down, but before things would completely halt, a new choir emerged on the campus of Fresno State University.
I first started working with Fresno State in 1997, and I worked with Dolores Standifer. Dolores at the time was a music major at Fresno State, and she had the respect of all of the music department.
Dr. James Walton became the chairman of the African American Studies Department. He was an English professor at Fresno State. He had a vision. He wanted the gospel choir to be incorporated into the music program in the music department. That was quite a challenge because the music department was very suspicious of gospel music because they felt that they did a lot of yelling and they felt that it would strain the voices of music majors. So they were kind of reluctant, but he incorporated the gospel choir into the music department.
So I was a music major at Fresno State, and I was in the concert choir there. It's something that is required of music majors, and that's where I met and became friends with Dolores Standifer. And she was asked to direct the gospel choir, and she asked me if I would join as well. And I said, okay, I'm not sure how this is gonna work, but okay, I will do it.
These young people needed an outlet because they were not able to go to their home church, because most of them were from out of the city, and they were not able to go to their own church. And so the gospel choir became not only an outlet for them, but it also became a place where they could socialize with one another.
It became very multicultural. There are different types of people in there, not just African Americans. There were Asians in there and Caucasians. There was just all kinds. Age-wise, you had the 18-year-old who just, you know, started college, as well as me. I was in my 30s. So you had, and people that were older than me were in there as well. So it attracted all kinds of people.
He thought that with me being a voice major and being near graduation, that I could add legitimacy to the choir, because then I knew I was vocally trained, so that whatever techniques I taught the choir would not interfere with their vocal training. So that's how they kind of smoothed that through. And so they were able to add it to the curriculum.
Having a gospel choir on the conservative campus of Fresno State did not come without some pushback.
You know, dealing with the opposition, cultural opposition to the choir, was just an extenuation of dealing with the absence of inclusion of African American contributions to the music department. You know, it was just very few of us in the vocal music department for sure, and then there were more in the band, in the instrumental, but even that, it was so Eurocentric in its approach that it was, even in my classes, it was always a battle trying to find myself, trying to find who I was in this culture. So I was always pushing for inclusion, you know. And so I think the years that I was there, the 4 years that I directed the gospel choir, was always, I always felt like we were stepchildren, that there was grudging acceptance, you know. They wanted, somebody said, well, you know, we need to try to include, but it was never an open acceptance, especially among the vocal faculty. It might have been in other areas, but not among the vocal faculty. They had been trained in this a certain way, you know, we do European music and all this other stuff, you know, all this world music or all this African American music, you know, that's over there, and we want to keep it over there. So it was always a battle, but we persevered, and we had much more acceptance on the broader campus.
It was really a good experience, not only for me, but for them as well.
By the early 2000s, a noticeable shift was occurring in the church culture at large. Choir music was being phased out in favor of a more contemporary sound.
The choirs, I guess the decline of the choir era took place at 2000 was like okay, Prince had this song, 1999 or something, party something like it's 1999, because everybody, not everybody, but the consensus was around the world that 2000 was never going to come, that the world was going to end at midnight on, you know, December 31st, 1999. So everybody was kind of surprised when we woke up on, you know, New Year's Day, and we were still here. But because, I think because we had such a fatalist attitude, people decided that I'm gonna do what I want to do because I might not see tomorrow.
With the new millennium, the new sound, the new shift, the new culture of music and gospel and Christendom as a whole did transition Fresno scene as well.
Some of it, like Stomp and other songs, just weren't, the churches weren't ready for it, okay? You couldn't come in on a Sunday morning and say Stomp, okay? Because it just didn't flow. You're having, or doing the wave or some of the things.
It was a weird time. It was a good time, but it was very weird because some of the very staples that we had for such a long time were no more.
You had new artists popping up that carried a more contemporary sound, edgier sound, or Saints of Old would probably say a more worldly sound. but the sound of gospel, while the message does not shift, gospel is gospel, the message of Jesus Christ, the sound and how it was presented did shift.
The choir era has transitioned. Mainstream media, mainstream gospel music has now taken over. And during that time, between about 2000 to 2005, it was an interesting period for Fresno because you had several things that occurred within the local church scene. You had some churches that split. You had some pastors, well-known pastors that retired. You had some well-known pastors that died. I remember in 2002, Superintendent J.D. Perry from Powerhouse and Bishop Warren Wilson from Fresno Temple both died that same year. Those were huge losses for the church community. And when you have all of that that occurs within that short period of time, unfortunately, there are some casualties. And one of the biggest casualties during that period was the church choir.
In addition to the new contemporary gospel sound, praise and worship and praise teams ultimately trickled down to Fresno, ushering in another new era and sound.
Then there rose another Pharaoh.
Not only was the shift noticed, but you could also see it in the church because choir stands started disappearing. They started doing some remodeling of churches and, shifting and moving out the choir stand. And then there also seemed to be, I don't know where the lack of interest in the choir thing came in, but that because of that opened the door to that smaller praise setting.
Now, praise teams were the thing. Like now, so you've got Sounds of Zion. They were noted for being a praise team. West Side had a phenomenal praise team back in the day. Kind of my group, Spirit and Truth, is they took that ensemble praise team type of thing and started doing it.
We thought that we could have both. We thought we could have a choir and a praise team, but found out that there were people that resented the praise team because they weren't in it. And so because they weren't in it, they just kind of downed it, and they wondered why anybody would want to do something other than sing in the choir. We didn't at that time see the praise team as a part of the regular worship. There were people in the congregation that just didn't like it.
To be transparent, I wasn't accepting the praise and worship. It was a new genre of the gospel. It was a branch of the gospel music. And so it caught fire after a while. Not only I wasn't accepting of it, but other people were not accepting of it because it was a different brand of gospel music. We were so used to, we were already doing praise and worship, the congregational songs that we did, and sometimes it would be testimonial service as well, but we would sing all those old songs and, of course, incite fire within the church. But after a while, it caught on.
I'm going to always be a choir person, but times do change. And if we look back 20, 30 years ago, they weren't doing it like we did it either. So I think the careful thing you have to be careful of, make sure that God is anointing whatever you're doing. And things do change. They absolutely do change. And yes, now we have mostly praise and worship groups, but I like the idea, if you're the praise and worship, you also the choir.
Although we were trying to hold on to the rootedness and the foundation of the choirs, Sylvia Norman at the time, she also knew that something's changing and we need to get on board. And so what she started doing was giving microphones to different people in the choir to sing those parts. So the strongest soprano had the microphone, the strongest alto had the microphone, the strongest tenor had the microphone. And we were still a choir, but those voices were elevated above the rest. And so that was I think, her attempt to softly shift the church and transition the church into this new thing, as opposed to, all right, choir, we're done. 1, 2, 3, you 3 singers, you're doing it all now. Sylvia was wise enough to not do that. She was wise enough to say, let's slowly ease the church into what's happening.
For one of Fresno's staple artists and Bad's breakout gospel artist, this season as a whole would end up being a trying and traumatic one.
So in the early 2000s, my husband and I and Marcia Jones, we used to put on a camp called Dream Camp, and it was strictly for teens. We would go away to the mountains for the weekend and just have a great time. One particular weekend, we were there, and I just noticed my voice was it was hoarse the entire time, and I couldn't get my voice back. And I was like, oh, when we get back down to Fresno, everything will be fine. Not so. When we got back to Fresno, I realized my voice was still just really raspy and hoarse, and there was actually a little bit of pain that I experienced as well. And so I went to the ear, nose, and throat doctor, and they numbed me and stuck their tubes through my nose and started, searching to see what was going on. And sure enough, they found a cyst on my right vocal cord. And I was like, okay, so take care of it so I can get on my way, At the time, my husband and I had a baby. She was an infant, and I was teaching at Fresno Pacific University. I was leading the gospel choir at Fresno Pacific University, and so I'm telling the doctor, take care of whatever you need to take care of so I can speak to my baby, tell her how beautiful she is, and so I can teach at Fresno Pacific and lead this choir. And he said, yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that. We actually have to go in and remove the cyst. And I was like, okay, so here we go. So I was scheduled for surgery, ended up having that surgery, and I didn't know it at the time, but when they went in, the cyst actually ruptured. And I was already going to be on voice rest for 2 weeks right after that surgery, and it wasn't until I came back for that checkup that the doctor explained to me, oops, my bad. The cyst actually ruptured, and when it regrew, it grew back larger. So not only did I have the surgery, could not speak to my baby for 2 weeks, could not teach the choir for 2 weeks at Fresno Pacific. I was on 2 weeks strict vocal rest. I literally carried around a notepad and a whiteboard, and everything was in all caps when I was very upset, okay? So I had to have that first surgery, and then I had to schedule the second surgery. By the time the second surgery was scheduled, I was just like, God, what is happening? Like, what's going on? And at that point, I was struggling with my self-confidence. I became very insecure about my voice. Would it ever return? And the doctor even said, you will never be at full capacity again. Right? And so as a singer, as a new mom, as a gospel choir director, you don't want to be told that you'll never be at full capacity again. Your voice will never return to what it once was. That's like telling a football player, yeah, that injury that you have on your knee, like you'll never be able to run that route again on the football field. That's just not something that you want to hear. And so went in for that second surgery and mandatory 2 weeks voice rest again. And the entire time I'm like pleading with God. I'm like, God, please make this work. Please make them, allow the doctors to remove this cyst and do whatever needs to be done so that I can be back singing for you. It's not like I'm out singing for the world. Remember, I let that go at 14. I'm singing for you. I'm leading your people. I'm dedicated to you. So why me? Why does this have to happen to me? And after that second surgery, the doctor said that it worked. It worked. But again, I'll still never be at full capacity. And so I just left it in God's hands. But as I left it in God's hands, I realized that my own heart had become hardened. I felt betrayed by God. I felt forgotten by God and even by the gospel community in Fresno. I felt like I was fighting this battle on my own. And nobody understood why Reese stopped singing. People noticed that Reese stopped singing, but nobody checked in on me. Nobody checked in to see if I was okay, to see how I was healing, not just vocally, but mentally. When you're told that you're never going to be at full capacity again, doing the very thing that you feel like you were put on this earth to do, it does something to you mentally. And nobody checked in on me. It was a battle that I fought alone with my husband, of course. But it was a dark, dark time. It was a dark time. And it took me 20 years to come out of that cave and to remember who I was and to remember who I belonged to and to remember what God put me on this earth to do and to ask for Him to just dispel the darkness and the insecurity and the fear and the self-doubt that really paralyzed me for 20 years.
In spite of her doubts and fears, God said it was time for a comeback with a new live recording.
What people don't know is the night before, August 27th, I had a conversation with Pastor Wendy Henderson Wyatt of Columbus, Georgia, my spiritual mother and my mentor. And I wasn't going to show up the next night. I was going to cancel. Pastor Wendy walked me through it. And she said, baby, she said, my Reese, this is what she calls me, my Reese, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to bed tonight. You're going to have a good night's rest. You're going to wake up tomorrow. You're going to eat you a good meal. She walked me through everything up to the moment that I stepped onto that stage. Had it not been for that conversation with her that night, and I wasn't gonna reach out to her. She knew in the spirit that there was something going on, and she reached out to me. And when I saw her name pop up on my phone, I was like, I'm not gonna answer. I'm not gonna answer because she's gonna talk me out of quitting. She's gonna talk. And sure enough, she talked me out of quitting. She told me all the reasons why I deserved to be on that stage and reminded me of my mandate, reminded me to finish the assignment. She reminded me of all the labor and all the toil that had gone into the songwriting and the rehearsals and the lighting and paying for the music. Like, she reminded me of all of it. And she says, and you're gonna get out there and you're gonna minister like never before. She talked me onto that stage.
As times were forging ahead in the gospel community, James Archie and Joe Warren embarked on a groundbreaking venture for Fresno. Saved Productions, a gospel label birthed and based in Fresno, California.
So Saved Productions. Oh man, I remember making waves locally. I remember one of the artists, I actually think I opened up for her, Michelle. And she had done a project with Saved Productions that with our own Elder James Archie and Brother Joe Warren and a few others who had come through and really launched and mobilized, activated Saved Productions. But one of our first, if not the first, recording label and company, production company here in the area, yeah.
I had the opportunity to be the manager of Saved Production at one point. And I was working under Joe Warren, the owner, and he had the record studio, record company there, and he had some artists that he was trying to get through there and get them out, and he had another producer that wasn't quite cutting it, so I was there to make sure I can get the artist's contract honored, whatever it may have been. So when I worked with Saved Production, it was a great opportunity. It was a great learning tool also in some areas.
They were really the premier media company, as I recall, in this area.
Saved Productions was kind of the go-to for video and lighting back in the day, because they were reasonable, because they were approachable, and because you knew that they were about something.
You a lot of times as a musician, especially if you're not playing for any A-list artists, then you're going to home studios when you're laying down tracks, and some of them can be pretty good, and some of them are just like, well, okay, here we are. But it gave us a sense of wow. We were like, okay, this is cool. Look at this, is a real studio, a building actually dedicated to doing music. And so for a lot of us, that was a great experience.
They created an opportunity here in Fresno, and we were for a local studio here in town. We were becoming successful in that season, so it was great opportunity.
As the gospel scene slowed down in the Valley in the mid-2000s, a new voice would emerge, taking Fresno by storm.
Yeah, Keisha, man, that's my girl. So I've known her for more than 25 years, I think now. And she came from Los Banos, right? I didn't even know. I knew we used to pass through Los Banos to go somewhere. But she has a larger-than-life personality, and that's the one thing that if you know Keisha, number one, she never changes. Number two, her magic is how she can hold a crowd.
I just thought she was fantastic, and she is fantastic. And I think Fresno maybe was a little shocked, but happy. I think they enjoy her music.
She is a dime, man. I first saw Keisha at an event. I was with Spirit and Truth. We were singing in Merced. I believe it was a function sponsored by Pastor Gwen Amy. And I believe that Keisha was on program, and she didn't have a musician, but she just got up there flat-footed, as we know her to do, and she just did her thing. And I think the thing about Keisha that was amazing is we're used to giving a lot of attention to your Karen Clarks, who can hit those loud, high notes, your squalors, as we say. And Keisha was like, I don't need to do that. This is what I do. And she does it well.
I feel like I was actually the black sheep of gospel music because of my style and how I used to do my music and everything. But I also feel that it made me stand out and it made me different. And it took a minute for them to receive my style. They didn't really know what to do with it. Like, okay, where do we take this? We like this, but it's just different. And I'm just different, Now,
one of the things that I think has always been key with Keisha is that she has always remained true to who she is and where she is.
She's very bold. She's very in your face. If I were to name her after a character, I would call her. I used to joke with her. I used to call her Sophia from from The Color Purple. I'm talking about the personality. She's so bold. She's so out with it. That's just her, and she's very unapologetic about her sound, and that's what. But she's contributed so much because she's never strayed from what got her there. If you go to her shows, you hear her singing, she's always glorifying God. She's always talking about God. She'll stop and pray for somebody in a hot second, right in the middle of her singing.
I like being different. I like being able to bring a different flavor and bring a different sauce because I have so many styles. And being able to have so many styles, you get to kind of get in there and play with them. And that's what people have come to love. They love to see me playing around with my vocals and doing all the juggling acts with the vocal cords and this, that, and the other. And so, yeah, I feel very accepted in the gospel industry.
While key individuals attempted to keep the gospel scene alive in Fresno, the spark that was evident in the 80s and 90s seemed to have been gone, and the momentum was dwindling.
Yeah, so the late 2000s was a really odd time. Things were kind of moving, but not at the rate that they had been moving. You know, the 80s, the 90s, it was just event after event, movement after movement. There was just a huge spark, and then it just kind of died down. All those groups that had started had kind of fizzled out, and Chris St. James was one of the ones that was really trying to keep things going. During the late 2000s, he brought the Edwin Hawkins Love Fellowship chapter here and started the Greater Valley Chapter Singers. And out of that, you know, he started the Lifetime Achievement Awards in gospel music. So Chris was one of the ones that was trying to keep things moving, and things were moving, but not quite at the rate that they had been moving.
Father God, I appreciate you.
There's always like a catalyst, you know, one person or a couple of people or whatever that move the needle. And so the catalyst that's been moving gospel to higher heights in the valley is Christian David.
He's one of those that are bringing gospel back alive and bringing concerts and groups and choirs to our area to bless the people in this area and to give them a new awakening.
And I think having that kind of inspiration from the younger generation coming up, keeping it alive and bringing it back.
He is so, I'll just keep using the word persistent. That baby is persistent. He will drive, and his songs are so long, they're wordy, but they're good. They're good for the soul, and they're anointed. And then the one song that didn't have a lot of words was Father God, I Appreciate You, you know, a couple of lines. That song took off. Took him around the world, took him around the nation. Music-wise, he's worked with some of everybody. I don't know anybody that he hasn't worked with. From LA to the Bay, Noel Jones, Bishop Dockery, traveling with Christian David and Friends, that was huge. I don't even think he realizes how huge that was.
Well, to be under the direction of Christian is like being under the direction of a young Kurt Carr or a young Donald Lawrence. His attention to detail is very, very good.
One thing that brings me great joy is seeing the people of God blessed. When my events happen and I see people praising God, or I see people leaving and posting about what a good time they had, or I see and hear people leave inspired, that's my blessing. I did not plan on being a gospel recording artist. I had a conference that I had planned in 2012 that did not happen. And so rather than cancel the whole weekend, I just said, let's just take the music we were going to do for the conference and we'll be in concert on Saturday night. And I remember it was Tiffany Mangum, Beth Hunter, Kimmy Binion, Ashley Young, and Lamont Walker. They were with me. And I just slapped it Christian David and Friends live in concert. And we had like 2 weeks to promote it because I had been promoting a conference all the way up until that point. And then we shifted it to the concert and it was packed. It was standing room only, to my shock and amazement. And so after that, I started getting calls like, hey, can you come here? Can you come here? Can you come here? And it was kind of just, at that point, something I was doing. Whenever I got called to go sing somewhere, I would call Tiffany Beth, and Levita Wheeler came in a few months after that. And so it would just be something I would do. But about a year or so later, a little more than a year later, the Lord dropped it on me that this is actually something bigger that you need to release. And I linked up with my big brother, Devin Watkins, and we did my first live recording in January of 2014. And it was kind of off to the races from there. and I have gotten to work with some of the best vocalists California has to offer, and I am so grateful.
He is what, like, if different people like Sylvia Norman and Adeline and Gwen Amy and I can name a few, Marsha Jones. I mean, I can just keep going. You know, all those different people, and I you know, I don't want to keep naming everybody, but all of those different people, if they say, okay, we want to pour into one person to represent gospel music in Fresno, that would be Christian.
There are some really kind of new things that are going on in the gospel arena.
Well, you know that ebb and flow, that wax and wane thing. I think we're on the up.
The new wave of gospel in the valley is, I believe, is attributed to the hunger of the people, needing again to have that spiritual connection with each other, coming together.
God will always have a witness. And I think it's wonderful that these groups are popping up because life goes on. And those of us that have been doing things, we're going to be off the scene. So there has to always be God's music out there. So I encourage them, do all you can to introduce God to somebody else.
Although established in the area for many years, Gwen Amy Hollins shows no signs of slowing down.
Gwen Amy, the quintessential musician, singer, minister. She has the ability to just bring light to everything.
One of my supreme mentors.
A legend, and that is not used loosely.
She's our local Shirley Caesar. That's what I was thinking about. I would totally went black. I'm about to say beans, greens, potatoes.
First thing I think of is, thank you, Lord. That is her song wherever she goes.
Oh my God. First of all, she is one of my first loves as far as gospel is concerned. Growing up, she was the GOAT. And is now the GOAT.
There just not a lot of us have what Gwen has. And I'm telling you, she changed and set on fire many.
When my family's cold and my friends they offer you, I need you, Lord, to help me make it through.
Gwen is the gatekeeper of gospel music, I think, here in the Valley.
I just got to say, and I've told her, that the courage she has as a pastor and one of the women pastors in the Valley, it's hard because you're not accepted. I've been to places where I've asked her to pray, and the deacons were afraid to have her pray because she's a woman, and they would jump in. And she said, didn't you ask me to pray? I said, yes. But, you know, because she was a woman, they felt intimidated by somehow. But I respect her because, again, the anointing. People meet her for the first time, and you can feel the anointing of God on her. And she doesn't, it's not about where she's sitting. She don't care if she's in the pulpit or she's on the pew. She doesn't have that type of attitude where it's me, me, me.
The gospel when you're singing the gospel, you're singing about Jesus Christ and how he will save you. And it is only through him that we are saved. So the gospel is always going to be preached. It's always going to be sung.
With gospel back on the rise in Fresno, a new generation is emerging as well.
I've seen Tiffany Benyon grow up and become, she's not an ambassador, but she's kind of like an ambassador for gospel music, I think, because she's involved in the city of Fresno.
Olivia Williams, when she was here in Fresno, she had carried a spirit about her that was refreshing, and it was worshipful, and it was anointed. That's what I said, very anointed.
Oh, that Ashley Williams person, she's phenomenal.
Nate Renteria, that young man, keep your eye on him. He's got the drive, he's got the ambition, he's got the, and he's got the influence. I'm seeing that he's been working, especially as a musician, working from the Bay down to Bakersfield, this area. He's got it.
I want to also say Jason Spencer, Pastor Jason Spencer, he is really, really moving his ministry forward with being current.
So, what is the gospel according to Fresno?
The gospel according to Fresno is still alive and well.
The gospel according to Fresno, I feel, is just really getting started.
I would say if I were to write what is the gospel according to Fresno, it's evolving, it's ever changing.
The gospel according to Fresno, diverse, challenging, sometimes neglected.
The word that keeps coming to my mind is community-centered. It really is. We're all connected.
Well, you know, I believe in this glory, the glory, the glory, the glory. So it's like each generation should build upon the last generation. So each round should go higher and higher, and that's what I expect to see in Fresno in terms of gospel.
If you're looking for good music, you can look no further than Fresno. We got it.
It's a hidden gem. It's a hidden gem.
There are people that's within the gospel industry is tired of us not really doing anything and not being given the credit that we are due.
This valley will never be the same. The gospel music sound here in Fresno is in great hands, and I know it's going to go to different levels. And when we fully realize what we have, we'll blow it up. We'll blow it up.